Welcome back to the lab, where we turn science into tools you can use today. If you're struggling with fat energy crashes, late night cravings, or inconsistent weight loss, this isn't your fault. The human body is wired for survival, not six-pack abs. But once you learn how your biology works, you gain control. And today I'm going to tell you about the one single change I made in my life that dramatically accelerated fat loss. Without drugs, starvation, or endless cardio. This isn't hype. It's hard science, it's biology, and once you understand it, you'll never fight your body again. So let me take you into the biology of what really started this transformation. There's a moment each day when your body and brain are the most ready to be programmed, right after waking. And the signal that sets everything in motion isn't food, caffeine, or even exercise. It's like one simple act, getting sunlight in your eyes within the first 30 minutes of waking, was the catalyst that began to shift everything. And I don't mean through a window or with sunglasses on. I mean actual light from the sun hitting the photoreceptors in your retina. Now here's why that matters. Inside your brain, there's a structure called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It's the master clock that sets your circadian rhythm. That clock regulates when your body feels alert, when it winds down for sleep, how much fat you burn, and even how your hormones behave throughout the day. The only way that master clock knows what time it is through the light that comes into your eyes first thing in the morning. And that light doesn't just tell you it's daytime, it sends a cascade of signals throughout your entire body. When I started stepping outside and getting 10 to 15 minutes of natural sunlight, before looking at my phone, before coffee, before checking emails, I noticed something within a week. My energy levels began to stabilize. My appetite, which was usually erratic, especially in the late afternoon and evening, began to level off, and I didn't change what I was eating. I'd even add or remove any workouts. But my body composition began to shift, because what was happening underneath was powerful. My cortisol rhythm began to normalize. Now, cortisol often gets a bad reputation. People think of it only as the stress hormone. But here's the thing. Cortisol is not inherently bad. It's essential. It gives you energy, focus, and readiness. The problem isn't cortisol itself. It's when cortisol is released. Most people today have a delayed cortisol pulse because they're not getting sunlight in the morning. Instead, they get blue light from their phones, artificial light from screens, and then wake up groggy with cortisol levels that are out of sync. That leads to fat storage, especially around the abdomen, because the body thinks it's under constant low-grade stress. But if you get that natural light early, you're telling your brain, this is morning, it's time to be alert, it's time to mobilize energy. That sets the cortisol peak early in the day, where it should be. And as a result, by the time evening rolls around, your body naturally starts to wind down, you sleep better, you recover better. And more importantly, your metabolism begins to shift from storing energy to utilizing it. Another key player here is dopamine. When you get sunlight in your eyes first thing in the morning, your dopamine system gets a healthy surge, one that's natural and beneficial. Dopamine is often talked about as the molecule of motivation and drive, but it also controls movement, energy, and behavior. When you get that first pulse of dopamine from morning light, you're literally setting your nervous system into a mode of forward action. And here's where that connects to fat loss. When dopamine is balanced early in the day, your brain is less likely to chase fast, high reward behaviors later, like snacking, sugar binges, or eating late at night. And all this cascade of neurochemical changes, it starts with something free and accessible, stepping outside and letting your biology do what it was designed to do. Our ancestors rose with the sun not because it was podic, but because biology demanded it. We've broken that pattern with modern life, screens, blackout curtains, artificial lighting, and the cost is hormonal confusion. Appetite hormones like leptin and ghrelin go haywire. Insulin sensitivity drops, sleep becomes shallow, and fat storage becomes more efficient. That's the wrong kind of efficiency. But once I restored that early light exposure, all of it started to rebalance. I was hungrier in the morning, which is actually a good sign, and more satisfied at dinner. My sleep quality improved, and I started waking up without an alarm. And as a result, my body stopped storing fat unnecessarily, especially around my midsection. And again, this wasn't from a new supplement or a harder workout. It was from aligning my light exposure with how my biology is meant to function. It's important to know that even on cloudy days, going outside works. The lux, the measure of light intensity from overcast sunlight, is still significantly higher than any indoor light. And if you live in a place with long winters or minimal daylight, using a 10 lux light box in the morning can provide many of the same effects. The key is consistency. Every day you give your body that light cue, you're reinforcing the proper metabolic rhythm, and every day you miss it, you push your biology out of sync. So this was the one change that started it all. I didn't even realize how powerful it was until I stacked it consistently for several weeks. But once I saw the difference, not just in fat loss, but in how I felt, I couldn't unsee it. This is where it begins. And it's free, accessible, and available to anyone willing to take 10 minutes in the morning to let the sun reset their system. Start tomorrow. Step outside. Let the light in. What surprised me most on this journey wasn't just how light impacted fat loss. It was how much dopamine played a central role in managing cravings, energy, and even self-control. When we think about losing fat, the first thoughts people usually have are around willpower, cutting calories, or spending more time in the gym. But the truth is, what drives most people's behavior, especially their eating habits, isn't logic, it's chemistry. And one of the most powerful chemicals driving those behaviors is dopamine. Now, dopamine is often misunderstood. People hear the word and immediately associate it with pleasure. But dopamine isn't about pleasure. It's about motivation, drive, and anticipation. It's the system in your brain that governs whether you pursue something or not. And that includes food. What I discovered early in this process is that if your dopamine system is dysregulated, meaning it's constantly spiking from artificial rewards like scrolling, junk food, or digital stimulation, it becomes extremely difficult to manage your cravings. Not because you're weak, but because your brain is looking for the next hit of dopamine. So when people say they can't resist late night snacking, or they always cave after dinner for something sweet, what's actually happening isn't a failure of willpower. It's a chemical imbalance that's been building all day. I noticed that my own patterns were following that exact trend. I could eat clean all day, but by 8 or 9 p.m., I was rummaging for something salty or sugary. Not because I was hungry, but because my brain was trying to balance its reward chemistry. That's when I started focusing on controlling dopamine early in the day. The moment I began to prioritize healthy dopamine spikes in the morning, mainly through natural light, movement, and focus, I noticed a massive change in the evening. My cravings began to drop, not just slightly, but dramatically. I didn't feel like I was fighting myself. I didn't feel deprived. And the reason why is simple. When dopamine is regulated early in the day, the brain isn't chasing reward at night. It's already satisfied. That was a game changer. Let me explain what's going on under the surface. Dopamine follows a rhythm, much like your sleep-wake cycle. If you spike dopamine too early with artificial inputs like social media, sugary breakfast foods, or loud notifications, you're hijacking your dopamine system. It gives you a short-term high followed by a crash. And when dopamine crashes, the brain starts scanning for the next easy way to bring it back up. That's where cravings come from, not from hunger, but from a low reward state. And if your brain thinks you're running low on reward, it will push you toward high-fat, high-sugar, hyper-palatable foods. That's not a character flaw, that's biology. So I shifted my approach entirely. Instead of trying to fight cravings with discipline, I focused on supporting my dopamine system naturally. It started with the morning light, like I mentioned earlier, but I layered in other habits too. Getting in some movement, even just walking before checking my phone, and doing at least 5 to 10 minutes of focused work early in the day. That created what we call dopamine layering, stacking healthy rewards in a way that builds sustained motivation throughout the day. And that process sets the tone for how your brain evaluates rewards later on. If you train your dopamine system to expect artificial highs, like mindless scrolling, processed foods, or constant stimulation, you dull your sensitivity. The receptors in your brain literally begin to downregulate. That means you need more of something to feel the same reward. And that's why people fall into cycles of overeating. The food isn't even satisfying anymore. It's just trying to hit a chemical baseline. But when you reset the system, when you go back to simple, healthy, natural inputs, your dopamine sensitivity increases. You begin to get joy and satisfaction from things like real food, deep focus, physical movement, even conversation. That's what breaks the cycle of compulsion. That's what makes fat loss sustainable. And here's something that surprised Meg. Regulating dopamine doesn't just affect eating. It affects how much energy you have to move. The more balanced your dopamine, the more willing you are to take action. I started naturally wanting to walk more. I wasn't forcing it. I was drawn to movement. That's dopamine doing what it was built to do, directing behavior toward meaningful output. And when movement becomes a natural part of your day, your energy expenditure goes up, your metabolism ramps up, and your fat burning capacity increases. All without tracking steps or counting calories. There's also a hormonal layer here that's important. When you regulate dopamine, you reduce stress, and when stress drops, cortisol becomes more stable. That in turn affects insulin. And when insulin sensitivity improves, your body becomes better at mobilizing fat for fuel. It's all connected. One system feeds the next. This is why dopamine matters so much, not just for mood or motivation, but for actual physiological fat loss. It's important to point out that this isn't about removing all pleasure or becoming robotic. It's about restoring balance. When your brain is functioning the way it's supposed to, you don't need to white knuckle your way through cravings. You don't need to fear food or obsess over it. You're in control because your chemistry is aligned with your goals. What really convinced me was not just the shift in how I looked, but in how I felt. There's a peace that comes from knowing you're not being pulled by invisible forces, that your behaviors are no longer being dictated by urges, but by intention. And it all started with learning to manage that one molecule, dopamine. Control dopamine early, and you control the rest of the day. What truly shifted my results wasn't just about what I was doing the day. It was how I ended the day. If there's one thing people consistently overlook when trying to lose fat, it's the power of sleep. Not just the number of hours, but the quality, consistency, and alignment with your natural biology. We often treat sleep like an afterthought, like it's just passive downtime. But the truth is, sleep is the most active state for fat loss your body has. It's where your brain repairs, your hormones reset, and your metabolism recalibrates. And when sleep is disrupted or ignored, it doesn't matter how clean you eat or how much you work out. Your body is fighting an uphill battle. I remember when I was trying to push through fatigue with more caffeine, longer workouts, and tighter meal plans, thinking discipline was the solution. But the more I did that, the more I plated. I started holding on to fat in places I never had before, mainly around the midsection. I was doing everything right during the day, yet the progress just stalled. That's when I started looking at my evenings. And what I discovered was that my sleep timing, my exposure to light at night, and even the temperature of my room were all sending my body the wrong signals. Sleep is not just rest, it's hormonal communication. When you sleep deeply and consistently, your body releases growth hormone in the early part of the night. That hormone helps repair tissue, burn fat, and build lean muscle. It's also during sleep that your brain flushes out toxins, regulates your hunger hormones, ghrelin and leptin, and resets your insulin sensitivity. But if you're scrolling your phone late at night, watching blue light screens, or staying up past your natural circadian rhythm, you're interfering with that entire process. You might still be getting 6 or 7 hours, but the quality of that sleep is compromised. I started making a few small changes. The first was setting a consistent wind down time, not a strict bedtime, but a rhythm. About 90 minutes before I wanted to fall asleep, I'd start dimming the lights. I'd reduce screen, sometimes wearing blue light blockers if I had to be on a device, but ideally I'd just disconnect. That one shift alone started changing how fast I could fall asleep and how deep my sleep became. Then I paid attention to temperature. Most people don't realize how crucial this is. Your core body temperature needs to drop about 1 degree Celsius to fall asleep and stay in deep sleep. So I made sure my room was cool, around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. I also started taking warm showers about an hour before bed because when you step out of the warm water, your body naturally begins cooling down faster, signaling your brain to prepare for rest. Again, it wasn't complicated, but it was incredibly effective. But here's what made the biggest difference aligning my sleep with my circadian rhythm. Your body has a natural internal clock, and when you live in sync with it, everything works better. Your mood, your hormones, your metabolism. The most powerful way to do this is by anchoring your wake time to the rising sun and your sleep time to the falling darkness. I made it a point to wake up at the same time every day, even on weekends, and to get sunlight within 30 minutes of waking. That helped reset my internal clock, making it easier to fall asleep at night without forcing it. Now, when sleep became consistent and deep, everything else started falling into place. My energy throughout the day increased. I wasn't crashing in the afternoon or reaching for sugar to boost alertness. My workouts felt more powerful. My recovery improved. And I started burning fat, especially visceral fat, at a much faster rate. Why? Because my body wasn't in a constant state. Poor sleep is a hidden stressor. It elevates cortisol, increases hunger, and reduces your body's ability to access fat stores for fuel. But deep sleep, especially in the early night, is like flipping a switch in your metabolism. Your body moves from storing mode to burning mode. One thing I began to notice was how much my hunger changed. On nights I slept well, I wasn't thinking about food all day. I felt more in control. And the reason is biological. Deep sleep regulates ghrelin, the hormone that signals hunger, and leptin, the hormone that signals fullness. When you don't sleep well, ghrelin spikes and leptin drops. You literally wake up hungrier and less able to feel full. That's why people who don't sleep enough often eat hundreds of extra calories the next day without realizing it. It's not a matter of discipline, it's chemistry. And here's what ties it all together. When you improve your sleep, you also improve your dopamine baseline. That makes it easier to stay focused, easier to resist cravings, and easier to maintain the habits that lead to fat loss in the first place. It's all one connected system. Sleep, dopamine, light, metabolism. We tend to treat them as separate things, but they're just different expressions of the same core rhythms. Once I made this change, I realized fat loss wasn't about pushing harder. It was about aligning better, letting the body do what it was designed to do. And that meant respecting sleep as a critical lever in the process, not a luxury to be sacrificed for more productivity. The truth is, when your sleep is optimized, your body becomes a fat-burning machine, not just during the day, but all night long. Sleep isn't the reward for working hard. It's the foundation that makes everything else work. There was a period where I thought the only way to lose fat fast was to train harder, eat cleaner, and push through the exhaustion. And while effort does matter, I missed something crucial. It wasn't about adding more effort. It was about shifting when I made that effort. That's when I discovered the massive impact of timing my workouts with my body's natural biology. This wasn't about convenience, and it certainly wasn't about squeezing in exercise wherever I could. This was about precision, about aligning physical movement with the moments when my body was most primed to burn fat. What made the biggest difference for me wasn't some revolutionary workout technique. It was learning to train in a specific window of the day, particularly in the late morning to early afternoon. Not only did this help regulate my cortisol levels, but it also improved my insulin sensitivity and tapped into my body's natural ability to oxidize fat as fuel. When you work with your internal clock rather than against it, your energy improves, your mood stabilizes, and your body becomes more efficient at using the fuel it already has, namely stored fat. Here's the science behind it. Cortisol, the body's alertness and readiness hormone, peaks shortly after waking and starts to taper off in the late morning. If you time your workouts during that period, let's say between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., you're training when your body is already in a metabolically active state. You're not fighting fatigue or pushing uphill against your physiology. Instead, you're harnessing what's already happening inside your body. And when you do that, everything becomes more effective. I began to structure my workouts accordingly. I didn't make them overly long or complicated. A focused strength training session for 345 minutes, combined with low-intensity walking either before or after, was enough. But it wasn't just the content of the session that mattered. It was the consistency of timing. Over time, my metabolism started to adjust. My appetite became more predictable. My cravings decreased. Why? Because my body finally had rhythm. And rhythm is what your metabolism depends on. There's also something powerful that happens when you work out in the fasted state, especially in the morning. If you've had a full night of quality sleep, your body has already shifted into fat burning mode by the time you wake up. If you do low intensity movement, like a 20 to 30 minute walk before your first meal, you're not just burning calories, you're telling your body to use fat as the primary fuel source. That doesn't mean you need to skip breakfast every day. It means you're making the most of the natural hormonal window that supports fat oxidation. I experimented with this by walking outside every morning right after waking. Not only did it anchor my circadian rhythm by exposing me to sunlight, but it also became a meditative, focused moment of the day, something that calmed my nervous system and reduced background stress. This was important because chronic stress, even the kind we ignore, keeps cortisol elevated. And when cortisol stays too high for too long, it signals your body to store fat, especially around the abdomen. So walking in the morning wasn't just about movement. It was about calming my system, training my metabolism, and aligning my energy with the natural environment. Then there's the role of resistance training. When I timed it around midday, after my first meal, but before my energy started to dip, it had a profound effect on my body composition. Lifting weights or doing high intensity intervals in this window increased my insulin sensitivity for the rest of the day. It meant the food I ate post-workout was more likely to be used for muscle repair and energy, not stored as fat. This timing allowed me to eat more flexibly and still lose fat because my body was primed to handle the nutrients efficiently. What surprised me the most was how much better I felt throughout the day when I trained at the right time. I had more focus. I needed less caffeine. My sleep improved because I wasn't exercising too late, which can spike body temperature and delay melatonin release. It all fed into itself. Better workouts led to better recovery, which led to more fat loss and higher energy levels. That feedback loop became self-reinforcing. I also started paying attention to what I did after my workouts. One small change made a big difference, ending each session with a brief walk or light movement. Not only did this help clear lactate from the muscles and aid recovery, but it also smoothed the transition from high sympathetic activation, what we call fight or flight, into a more parasympathetic state. And the more you can shift back into that calm, balanced mode, the better your digestion, the more stable your hormones, and the easier it is to maintain fat loss without burnout. So many people are stuck in a cycle of overtraining and under-recovering. They hit the gym hard at random times, slam protein shakes, stay wired late into the night, and wonder why the fat won't budge. The problem isn't intensity. It's timing. Your body is a biological system governed by rhythm. Align your efforts with those rhythms and everything works better. Go against them and you're constantly swimming upstream. What I ultimately realized is that fat loss isn't a sprint. It's a rhythm game. And when you time your workouts to match your hormonal and metabolic peaks, when you move early in the day to unlock fat oxidation and train during your most energetic window, you don't just lose fat. You become more resilient. You build a system that works with nature, not against it. And that's the key move with rhythm, and fat loss becomes inevitable. There's a specific moment each evening that quietly determines the outcome of your next day. Most people overlook it. They focus on what they're eating, how they're training, how many steps they're hitting, but they forget about one of the most metabolically powerful tools available to things: sleep. And not just any sleep. Deep, restorative, high-quality sleep that works like a full body reset. What changed everything for me was prioritizing my evening routine to optimize fat loss, not through gimmicks or sleep hacks, but through real physiological alignment. The truth is, fat loss doesn't happen while you're exercising. It doesn't even happen while you're eating or fasting. It happens when your body is repairing, when your hormones are regulating, when your brain gets the signal that everything is safe and balanced enough to start letting go of stored energy. And that signal is strongest when you're sleeping well. You can't out-train poor sleep. You can't out-diet broken circadian rhythms. You have to fix the foundation. I started with one simple shift: shutting down bright artificial lights 90 minutes before bed. Our bodies are hardwired to respond to light. It's the most powerful signal for regulating our circadian rhythm. When you're exposed to blue light from your phone, your laptop, or overhead LED lights late at night, your brain delays melatonin release. That means you fall asleep later, your sleep is lighter, and your body's overnight repair systems never fully engage. This includes fat metabolism. So when I dimmed the lights, turned off screens, and used warm spectrum lighting, I felt the difference. My body got the memo. It's time to shut down, not stay alert. This wasn't just about feeling tired at the right time. It was about preparing my system to enter deep parasympathetic recovery mode. That's where real fat burning signals get activated. Growth hormone, which helps mobilize fat and repair tissue, is released in pulses throughout the night, but only if you hit those deep stages of sleep. I optimized for this by finishing my last meal at least 3 hours before bed. Why? Because going to bed with a full stomach forces your body to prioritize digestion instead of recovery. When I stopped eating late, I fell asleep faster, and I noticed my body felt lighter, more energized in the morning. It wasn't just that I was sleeping better. I was burning more fat while doing absolutely nothing. Then I looked at temperature. Your core body temperature needs to drop in order for you to fall into deep sleep. If your room is too warm or you're wrapped in layers of blankets, your sleep quality suffers even if you're unconscious. I set the thermostat to around 65 degrees Fahrenheit and used a cool, breathable blanket. That one environmental adjustment significantly deepened my cycles. I woke up without brain fog. My appetite was more regulated, and my cravings for sugar or late night snacking dropped drastically, not because of willpower, but because my sleep was finally doing its job. Cortisol also became more balanced. It's important to understand that cortisol isn't a bad hormone. It gives us energy, focus, and drive. But when it spikes at the wrong times, especially late at night, it can completely derail fat loss. That's why I was doing intense work after 6 p.m. and replaced evening activities with low stimulation routines like reading, journaling, or walking outside. Walking after dinner not only improved my blood glucose response, it also helped calm my nervous system. I wasn't chasing calories, I was chasing regulation, and that's where the real breakthrough came. The body loves predictability. When your sleep-wake cycle becomes consistent, when you fall asleep and wake up at roughly the same time every day, even on weekends, your metabolism begins to anticipate the rhythm. Hunger hormones like ghrelin and leptin become more balanced. Your fasting window becomes more effective. Your workouts feel easier. It's a domino effect. And all of it starts with honoring your sleep. I noticed this pattern the nights I stayed up scrolling. The next day felt like a survival mission. Cravings went up, focus was down, energy crashed. But when I protected those 90 minutes before bed, low light, no screens, quiet mind, light body, the opposite happened. I didn't need an alarm clock. I didn't need caffeine first thing. I didn't need to fight hunger. My biology was in sync, and it was working for me, not against me. There's another layer most people don't realize. Poor sleep impairs insulin sensitivity. Just one night of 4 to 5 hours of sleep can reduce your body's ability to manage glucose by up to 30%. That means the same meal you ate yesterday when you were well rested can have a completely different metabolic impact after a night of broken sleep. And that's a huge factor in stubborn fat loss. You're not gaining fat because of what you're eating. You're gaining fat because your body can't process what you're eating correctly anymore. Fix the sleep and you fix the metabolic response. I also paid attention to my sleep architecture. It's not just about duration. It's about hitting those cycles of deep sleep and REM. I started using nasal breathing at night to improve oxygen intake. Something as simple as mouth taping or breathing exercises before bed dramatically improved how rested I felt. When your oxygen levels remain stable overnight, your heart rate stays low, your stress hormones stay down, and your body finally gets into that deep recovery zone where fat burning is maximized. Eventually, sleep wasn't just a support tool, it became the secret weapon. I was losing fat even on rest days. My workouts became more efficient because I was recovered. I didn't need to train harder. I needed to recover smarter. The moment I treated my sleep as seriously as I treated my workouts and nutrition, everything shifted. People underestimate this because it feels too passive. Sleep isn't glamorous, but it is where the biggest transformation happens. You don't lose fat through effort alone. You lose fat through strategic recovery. And recovery starts every night when you shut down the lights, quiet your mind, and let your body do what it was designed to do. If you want to lose fat fast, don't just chase action. Master recovery.